home is an actual asset was false. Instead of putting large deposits to control these assets, it's pretty much done for and over. We believe that we need to save, and then you buy something because you now own something on a piece of paper, and then you wait for financial independence. Financial independence doesn't mean you need to become a millionaire to be able to be financially free, right? So the reason why when I say to people that if the first property you're gonna buy is your own home, there's a financial trap. And I will explain why. So I moved to the UK from Brazil at the age of 19. Absolutely broke, didn't speak a word of English, didn't have any money, didn't know any people, and it was absolutely hard. But my belief was that I have to own my own home, right? And I worked so hard for it, and that's how the drive for working for promotions after promotions pretty much came from. And then years later, I realized when I had it, I realized that the dream and the belief of having your own home is an actual asset was false, because an asset is something that puts money in your pocket. A liability is something that takes money away from your pocket. So, and what I learned from that was I was actually then trapped into a place, taking money out of my pocket, and was not the asset I was taught or believed to accept as truth, right? And eventually what I discovered was that I have put so much effort into something that was actually sucking a lot of cash out instead of putting money in my bank account. Now, over the years, I have gone through many challenges in different ways, and I have learned the lessons of how to generate cash flow and equity from assets which sometimes you don't even need to buy them. And that's one of the things I do through real estate. So I use real estate as a vehicle to generate cash flow and equity. And for most of them, it's actually before I even buy them, okay? There's a much smarter way to do that. And I will explain on this video today why buying your first home for you to live in is actually a myth. And it's kind of like a false belief from childhood that we were taught or conditioned that you need to own your own home to prove success, or whatever the definition is. So what is the traditional way that most people do today? And so people go and work so hard, they work for somebody else, and they want promotions at work because they want to earn more and have a better lifestyle, which is cool, it's fine. That's what we all want, right? For ourselves and our families. And most people, if you are like me, when I grew up, I was taught to believe that I have to work so hard, save, go and put a deposit and go and buy a house. Now, there's some truth in that, but not necessarily the first house for you to live in. And the reason is this: when you go and work for somebody else, you work hard, and you save what I call post-tax money. So you earn your wage. Most countries around the world, of course, the countries where you pay tax, which is most countries around the world, you then work so hard and you pay your taxes, and you have what I call post-tax money. So you then save that money to go and put as a deposit into a house. If you are buying your first home with that, then you are not buying an asset, you then buy a liability, because that money you have saved so hard, you put into an asset that's not going to generate income. Now, if it's a rental property, it's a slightly different story, and we're going to cover here in this video today. Now, that's the traditional rule, right? We save some money, whether it's 5% deposit, 10% deposit, 15, 20%, whatever the amount of the deposit is. That's usually how it is. But that can actually slow you down. And a really good tip on that is this: if you have a lump sum of cash, you would want to employ that cash into income generating assets or products or vehicles, which will give you the cash flow and ideally also build your equity. That's a wise investment to make, not necessarily to park cash into your own home or things that will give you very little every month that you're not going to even be able to leverage enough to be able to build enough profit to then build for the next deposit or potentially to scale. Okay, that's the most common trap that most people around the world find themselves in when they start buying real estate. Now, why that rule is a trap? So what happens is when you buy a house, right, that often ties up your money and doesn't give you any income, as we have discussed here a minute ago. Now, it can also limit your freedom and can also limit what you can do with your life. Nowadays, everything is based on technology. There's no more, I remember back in the days, traveling from the west to the east was just such a big thing, and people to do business with the west or the east or Middle East or Africa, Americas, used to be such a big thing. Nowadays, there's no barriers anymore, so you can pretty much be on the other side of the world in a maximum period of 24 hours. Now, work is changing. How we do business is also changing. And when you actually create roots in a place, I'm not saying don't create roots, it's not the point here of this video, but it's about raising your level of awareness about employ your money into a first time buyer house, right? Because that's the belief I had, that's the trap I went into, and that's what held me back so much for so long, because I had to keep working for other people for much longer until I had a life situation where I had to create a new way of generating cash flow and equity there. Now, what I do instead, perhaps will give you more value to you watching this video today. So I focus on controlling assets, okay? I do acquisitions, I consult to companies to whether they are real estate in different areas or whatever there is, but there's acquisitions involved in what I do. But what I do with most of my time is actually controlling assets. And what it means, so you control an asset instead of buying it today, so you don't have the whole bureaucracy of going through conveyancing, lawyers, solicitors, stamp duties, and the long process, which sometimes, especially in the UK, can take up to 8 to 12 months to acquire, to do the place up, to make it look really nice and get it cash flowing. So what I do usually is I control assets which have a specific potential for further development down the road, but instead of putting large deposits to control these assets, it's pretty much done for no money, right? There's a strategy there that I use. So control the assets for a number of years, and during that period I still generate the cash flow, and I'm also building equity on an asset which is under somebody else's name for a long period of time until I go and strategically complete the transaction a few years later. But during that period I have built cash flow, I have built equity in there, and in some cases, depending on how the actual property acquisition is done, you can actually use the funds from the property itself to generate enough equity and cash flow to then acquire it, okay? So what happens with that is it creates cash flow for a long period of time, which is a predictable type of cash flow, and these properties are rented out and can be rented out in a strategic way where you would achieve substantial amounts of cash flow. The traditional property today, traditional house today in the United Kingdom, for example, you can generate traditionally anything between 200 and 600 a month of net profit. Now, the problem with that is this: there's not, we haven't even deducted maintenance, taxes, and unexpected issues which could take money out of those few hundreds a month, which could potentially leave the person with just maybe a couple of thousands at the end of the year. Now, there's a way that you can strategically control assets so you don't need to put a deposit to earn that little cash flow every month, but then instead you rent it out in a strategic way, usually to corporations and a few other ways, where we're looking at net profits of 1,500, 2,500, 3,500 per month per property, even without having to buy it. So that helps me to scale fast, and that's something I've been doing for quite some time.